She actually called 911 because my lawn looked, in her words, too confident. I wish I was joking, but this lady came striding up my driveway, waving a red notice like it was a police warrant, shouting, "This entire cabin is a visual violation." And believe me, I wish that was the weirdest thing she said that morning. Somewhere between accusing my trees of lowering property values and informing me I was emotionally trespassing, it hit me. I should probably start recording because this was about to become the kind of HOA horror story people don't believe until they see it unfold on the evening news. I'm telling you, if you've ever wondered just how far a clipboard queen can push her authority, buckle up. You're about to find out exactly how sideways things can go when you stand up to a self-appointed emperor in a navy blazer. The funny part is this place, my grandfather's old cabin, was always a sanctuary. Every summer since I was a kid, I'd be here fishing off the dock, watching sunsets with my family, thinking the worst thing I'd ever have to deal with was a leaky roof or the occasional raccoon raid. My grandfather built this place in the 60s and left it to me in '88, every creaky floorboard holding a story, every window looking out on Clearwater Lake like a living memory. He never could have imagined that one day some woman in power heels would try to evict his ghost, much less over my grass. But the peace shattered the day Valerie Greaves, HOA president, clipboard wielder, and self-styled guardian of community standards, showed up on my porch, slamming the door so hard my coffee cup rattled. She didn't waste time with small talk. "You need to sign this," she demanded, shoving a glowing red sheet of violations in my face. The list was ridiculous. Unapproved truck landscaping, lowering neighborhood reputation. Excessive natural wood. You'd think I was running a bootleg lumberyard, not just living in my grandpa's cabin. She had that air about her, the kind that expects you to roll over and obey like she's the principal and I'm caught skipping class. I scanned her document and asked as politely as I could muster, "Could you show me the official paperwork proving the HOA has authority over this land?" For a split second, the mask slipped. Instead of producing anything, she doubled down. "That's not something you need to worry about. Your only concern should be compliance, like everyone else in the community." The everyone else hit like a slap, clear as day. In her eyes, I was a troublemaker. I handed the red paper back, told her I wasn't signing anything, and watched her face go from smug to red hot. "You have 48 hours to comply or face legal consequences," she hissed before storming off her SUV, taking a slow, vulture-like lap around the block, hunting for more victims. I just stood on the porch thinking how my grandfather would have handled it, with quiet confidence, not loud threats. He always said, "Don't fight loud. Fight prepared." So I poured myself a cup of coffee in his old chipped mug, sat at his table, and did exactly what he would have done, started gathering evidence. I called the county land records office and asked about property boundaries because if this was going to be a fight, I wanted to make sure I was standing on solid ground. The best battles, Grandpa used to say, are won before the other side even knows there's a war. The next morning, a black SUV pulled up two guys in khaki uniforms with official badges ready to conduct a tree and vegetation inspection at the HOA's request. I played the helpful homeowner, offered them coffee, and, unbeknownst to them, set my phone to record everything they said. "This whole area is under HOA management," one of them told the other, pointing toward my dock. They laid out a neat little timeline of when the neighborhood supposedly came under HOA control, completely oblivious to the fact that every word was going into my archive. After they left, probably patting themselves on the back for dealing with such a cooperative guy, I headed to the county office and put in a request for an official property survey. The clerk didn't even blink, said they'd have a certified surveyor out in 2 days. Walking back to my truck, I passed those old land plats from the 60s, my grandpa's name in faded ink, back when Clearwater was barely more than cabins and dreams. That's when I knew those old boundaries were about to become my best friends. And wouldn't you know it, as soon as I pulled into my driveway, there was Valerie sitting in her white SUV across the street watching my house like she was auditioning for CSI Suburbia. She probably thought I was drawing up a compliance plan. In a way, I was just not the one she expected. That night, I sat on the porch with a beer replaying the recording of the inspectors. Near the end, I caught Valerie's voice in the background telling someone, "Just say it's HOA land." That right there told me everything I needed to know. She was bluffing, hoping no one would call her on it. 2 days later, a professional survey crew showed up, tripods, electronic gadgets, the works. I stayed nearby, watching closely just in case Valerie decided to make another grand entrance. Sure enough, she barreled down the street, parked sideways, and marched straight at the crew. "What exactly are you doing on this property?" she barked. The survey chief barely looked up. "Routine property boundary survey for the legal owner." Valerie kept pressing, talking about board approval and HOA management, but the crew chief stood firm. "Verifying property lines is the owner's right, no HOA approval required." Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. "Sir, could you come over here for a minute?" the survey chief called to me. He spread out the map on his truck, tracing lines with his finger. "According to county records, your cabin is completely outside the HOA's jurisdiction. The boundary ends about 50 feet from your property." The silence was so thick you could hear traffic a mile away. Valerie's face looked like she'd just seen a ghost. She tried to argue, grasping for some legal loophole, but the surveyor just shook his head. "Grandfather clauses don't magically create HOA control." For once, Valerie was speechless. Of course she could not let it go. "I'm calling my attorney. We're going to contest this survey," she declared, finger trembling as she jabbed it at my chest. I thanked the crew, watched them leave, and felt like a chess player who'd just watched his opponent realize she'd been playing checkers. 3 days later, I got a notice for an emergency community meeting at the center, signed by Valerie and addressed to residents, not to me, which was telling. I figured, why not show up? I put on my best jeans, brought my notebook and phone, and sat in the back while Valerie played PowerPoint prosecutor. She flashed photos of my cabin, asked for a vote to enforce removal, never once mentioning the survey results. Some neighbors shifted in their seats, whispering. One woman asked, "Did you even check the boundary?" Valerie danced around the answer, never giving a straight reply. When it came time for questions, I quietly hit record on my phone and just sat back while Valerie called for a vote 12-3 against a few abstentions. "The motion passes," she announced, like she'd just solved world hunger. As people started filing out, I stood and made my way toward the exit. That's when Valerie finally saw me and stammered, "You weren't invited." I smiled. "Public meeting, public building, just here to listen." That night I sent a detailed email, attachments and all, to the county code office, survey, audio, emails, the works. Next morning, right on cue, Valerie screeched up, phone in hand, dialing 911 right there in front of everyone, claiming I was illegally occupying HOA land. The sheriff arrived. Officer Jack Reynolds, cool as ice, listened to Valerie's story, then asked for legal documents proving HOA authority. Valerie sputtered, repeated her lines, but it was clear the wind was out of her sails. I walked over, handed the officer the survey, and played the meeting audio, her own words contradicting her 911 call. The look on her face when he closed his notebook and told her that filing a false police report was a criminal offense, priceless. Neighbors started asking questions. "Have we been lied to? What else did we vote for? That's not legal." Valerie, surrounded, could only mumble about protecting property values. Officer Reynolds made it plain. Property law isn't based on community feelings. You filed a false report, made claims you knew weren't true, and harassed your neighbor. If this continues, charges will follow. Valerie's authority collapsed right there in front of everyone. The next morning she returned, not with threats, but with a public apology letter. Hands shaking, she taped it to my door, admitting she'd exceeded her authority, misled residents, and was resigning effective immediately. "I thought I was protecting the community," she said, voice small. "But I see now I was just trying to control what I had no right to." I almost felt bad for her, almost. After she left, I pulled down the old HOA sign and replaced it with a simple wooden plaque, "Private property. Original owner. Since 1988. That afternoon, neighbors gathered, apologizing for believing her, wondering aloud what their HOA fees had really bought. Turns out most of them had been paying for services the HOA wasn't even authorized to provide. We talked about forming a real community association, no clipboards, no dictators, just neighbors helping neighbors. As the sun set, I sat on my porch with my coffee, watching the lake glow gold, thinking about how sometimes the best way to win is to just let the truth catch up to the lies. Valerie's moving van appeared the next week, and the neighborhood's never been more peaceful or more united. Funny how a little sunlight and a lot of patience can change everything. Now you tell me, was I right to stand my ground, or should communities have more say over private property? Drop your thoughts below. Let's hear your wildest HOA stories and what you think justice really looks like when neighbors clash.